souls. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. My name is Carolyn and this channel is all about true crime, mystery, and anything abnormal. I highly recommend subscribing because this channel is definitely a vibe. I can't believe that I'm going to say what I'm about to say. I believe Scott Peterson deserves a new trial. What? Now, let me preface this by saying I do think Scott Peterson is guilty. And when all this new information came out recently about the Los Angeles Innocence Project, now, just to be clear, the Los Angeles Innocence Project is not the Innocence Project. These are two totally separate organizations. They have nothing to do with each other. When they came out saying that they thought Scott Peterson deserved a new trial, it was like the most dramatic eye roll of my life. Like, give me a break. I almost didn't even want to look into why do they think this. And then I decided, let's look into it. Let's see, what are they saying, why they think he needs a new trial. Now, we know Scott Peterson was convicted. It was circumstantial evidence, but it was very, very strong circumstantial evidence. And there's some new information and yeah, it has me questioning. So I'm going to briefly kind of go over the Scott Peterson, Laci Peterson murder. And then I'm going to tell you at the end what the new information is. And you tell me, am I crazy? Because I feel like I'm crazy. I can't believe that I even have come to this conclusion. But again, as I said, I do think he's guilty. I don't think he received a fair trial. So let's start at the beginning. Around Christmas time, 2002, everywhere that you went in Modesto, California, you would see flyers with Laci Peterson's picture on it saying that she was missing and asking for information. She was 7 months pregnant at the time. Laci and Scott Peterson on December 23rd were gearing up for Christmas, getting everything ready. And just like Scott did every month, he went to get his hair cut at Laci's sister's salon. Laci then returned home and Scott offered to go and pick up a fruit basket for Amy, who was Laci's sister who had cut his hair. And also he was going out to get a Christmas present for Laci. On the evening of the 23rd, Laci's mother had a conversation with Laci on the phone. Sharon, Laci's mother, was talking to Laci around 8:30 p.m. It was a pretty casual conversation, nothing alarming, nothing really significant, just, you know, a normal chit chat between a parent and a child. The next morning on Christmas Eve, Scott Peterson said that he left the house. Now, his first story and what he had told Laci's family was that he was going golfing. We know he didn't go golfing. He went fishing. And he claims that when he left, Laci was at home. She was about to mop the floors and she was watching a Martha Stewart video on making meringue. Around 10:30 a.m. that morning, Laci and Scott's neighbor found their dog with its collar and leash walking around the neighborhood. And so the neighbor just sees the dog out walking by itself, assuming that the dog maybe got out by mistake. They walk the dog back, put the dog in the backyard, and close the gate to the backyard. So Scott returns home in the early afternoon and he gets to the house and Laci isn't there. Laci's car is in the driveway, so she hadn't driven anywhere, and she's 7 months pregnant. The dog is in the backyard, so she's clearly not walking the dog. Also, her keys, her phone, her purse, everything that she would need to leave the house is inside the house. Now, Scott finds this a little bit weird. Scott decides to contact Laci's mother, Sharon. So he calls her and tells her he's just gotten home. Laci's not here. The car's in the driveway. The dog's here. Her purse is here. So immediately Sharon knows something is not right. So at 6 p.m., Laci is then reported missing to the police. Two police officers arrive at the Peterson home and they notice the same thing. Laci's car is there, Laci's purse is there, Laci's keys are there, Laci's phone is there. Nothing is missing except Laci and baby Connor, who she's carrying. Obviously, the first person that police suspect is always going to be the spouse, because it's almost always the spouse. And in this case, it may be the spouse. Well, in my opinion, it was the spouse. But, you know, police normally, the first person they look at is the spouse. So the thing was, they were suspicious of Scott because he was Laci's husband, but he had a lot of supporters. And those supporters at this time included Laci's parents and the rest of her family. So at this point, Laci's family does not have any suspicion about Scott. They think that something else has happened that Scott's not involved with. Now, the family's support of Scott is going to change very dramatically. But at this point, the family still thinks that Scott couldn't possibly have had anything to do with this. So you might be wondering, how did Laci and Scott meet, and how did this all begin? Laci's parents, Sharon Anderson and Dennis Robert Rocha, had a baby boy named Brent. And then 4 years later, Sharon was pregnant again, and this time she was pregnant with a little girl, and they named her Laci. Laci was said to be an extremely happy baby who didn't cry a lot, didn't fuss a lot. She was always happy. She grew up helping her family around the house. She had a big interest in gardening, and she would spend a lot of time with her mother working in the gardens around the household. When Laci's parents divorced, she moved with her mother Sharon to Modesto, California, and Sharon would later remarry. She remarried a man named Ron, and he became like a second father to Laci. This was really a typical, very happy family that Laci grew up in and had, you know, kind of like an ideal childhood. In 1994, Scott was working at a coffee shop, and Laci had gone into this coffee shop. And I guess when Laci saw Scott, she was interested, and she was very bold. She decided that she was going to write down her phone number and go up and give it to Scott. Laci confidently told her mother that Scott was the one, and they soon went on a date together. Their first date, they went deep sea fishing, and Laci actually got very seasick, and they had to kind of cut the boating part of the date short, but it also made for a very memorable first date. During his childhood, Scott grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment, and he had a brother. He lived with his parents, and he had a huge passion for golf. By the age of 14, he was out playing his father, and he dreamed one day of becoming a professional golfer. In 1990, Scott got accepted to Arizona State University on a partial golf scholarship. Scott didn't last long on the golf team. He had taken out a fellow golfer who was visiting the school to become maybe a potential golfer for that university. They ended up going out for drinks together, and it was said that Scott took him out for drinks. And this violated the rules of, I don't know if it was the team or the university, but the golf team, this was absolutely not allowed. So at that point, Scott got kicked off of the golf team. Scott and Laci dated for about 2 years, and after 2 years of dating, they decided to move in together. In 1997, after Laci had graduated from college, the two decided to tie the knot. And then a year later, Scott graduated from university as well. A few years later, the couple bought their home in Modesto, California, and Laci was a substitute teacher, and Scott worked at a fertilizer company. With Scott's stable income, Laci really embraced kind of the homemaker aspect of the relationship. She loved taking care of the house, making really wonderful meals, having guests to the house. She was always the perfect hostess, and she was a huge fan of Martha Stewart. In 2002, the joys of the couple just went through the roof when Laci found out that she was pregnant. And they found out that they were having a little boy, and his name they decided was going to be Connor. His due date was February 10th, 2003, but unfortunately, disastrous things would happen long before that date that would take the life of Laci and baby Connor. So this brings us up now to December 25th, 2002. This was the day after Laci was reported missing, and there was a huge search done for Laci. No one spared any expense. There was a 7-month pregnant missing woman, and the police threw every resource that they had at this. They were searching, huge search parties. They were searching along water lines. They were using helicopters. They were using horses. They were doing everything possible to try to find Laci and baby Connor. Scott didn't participate in the search. He did make phone calls to Laci's friends to see if any of them had heard from her or if they had any idea where she was. But this case was enormous at the time. It was all over Southern California. Soon it would be like known globally as an enormous case. And Scott really seemed kind of unbothered. And I don't like to judge people's reactions to things because everybody reacts differently, right? Some people are very calm, very stoic, and, they may be panicking on the inside, but outside they appear very in control. So, but I am also looking at this knowing where the story goes. So maybe I can judge Scott just a little bit. But yeah, he didn't seem to have a lot of concern. Initially, Laci's family offered a reward of $25,000 and other foundations contributed. And at one point, there was a $500,000 reward for any information about what had happened to Laci and baby Connor. And detectives noticed how unbothered Scott seemed. He didn't seem panicked. And his wife is 7 months pregnant with his child. It's Christmas Day. Like, Christmas Day is not a day people just randomly are going to be doing something else. This was a time where Laci would have been with her family. She would have been with Scott. There's absolutely nowhere else she could have been. So I think the fact that it was Christmas added to the suspicion, because it's not like it was a random Tuesday and he thought, oh, maybe she had a friend she went to see and whatever. Scott, he comes up with lots of stories. But yeah, Scott's pretty chill about the whole thing, and the cops are taking notice. When the police questioned Scott, he said that he had last seen Laci at 9:30 a.m. on December 24th. She was in the kitchen. She was watching a Martha Stewart show. She was getting ready to do some baking. He said she was going to clean the floors and that she planned to take their dog for a walk. When Scott was interviewed by the police, he didn't tell them what he had been telling everyone else, because he had claimed to everyone that day he had gone golfing. But when the police interviewed him, he claimed that he had this newly purchased aluminum boat. And if you've heard about the case, you know about the boat. And he claims that he was about 90 miles away and that he was fishing. Now, when police inquired more about, okay, what type of bait were you using to go fishing? Now, I don't fish, but apparently if you fish, you would know what kind of bait you're using. And he was fishing for sturgeon, I believe it's called. So I guess you use a particular type of bait for that particular type of fish. But Scott couldn't tell police what type of bait he used. And apparently, if you fish, that's a big deal. You should know that. He didn't. Now police were becoming extremely suspicious. Their suspicion was rising by the minute with Scott. Then on December 30th, 2002, a woman by the name of Amber Fry is watching the news and she sees the man she's dating. It's Scott. And he is on television talking about his missing pregnant wife. This came as quite a shock to Amber because Scott had told Amber, who had been dating for a while, that he was a widow. So Scott had told Amber he was a widow before Laci died. Now, I know a lot of people make a really big deal out of the fact that he said that he was a widower. I didn't find that part that suspicious. I'll tell you why. People that cheat, they lie, obviously. He's cheating on his pregnant wife with a woman who obviously he doesn't want her to know that he's married, expecting a baby, or any of that. So to me, him saying he's a widower, it doesn't surprise me that much. I think probably that maybe is not that uncommon with people who cheat on their spouses, but the timing of it all was very, very suspicious. Scott and Amber had met on November 20th, 2002, and they had been dating since then. When Amber found out that Scott had a wife, he had a pregnant wife, and she was missing, she called the police to tell them, that man on TV, I'm dating him. And she agreed to help the police to record conversations. So she was just going to act as though she didn't know what was going on and continue calling and speaking with Scott. And they were going to record the phone calls to see if he would say anything that would help police in the investigation. You know how earlier I had told you that Scott initially had the support of Laci's family? That all changed on January 17th, 2003. This is when it was discovered and the police informed the family, not only had Scott been cheating with Amber, he'd had 2 previous mistresses. And one thing he had told Amber was that he didn't want to have children. Now, Amber already had a child, and he had told Amber, I'm okay with your child, but I don't want to have a child on my own. Scott, you literally are having a child in a few months. So it's a little late to decide you don't want kids. But this is what he was telling Amber. And even on New Year's Eve, he pretended that it's so hard to say this with a straight face. He pretended that he was in Paris at the Eiffel Tower. He's on the phone with Amber. Oh my God, the lights are so beautiful. I'm at the Eiffel Tower. This is so magical. I wish you were here. Blah, 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 blah. He was not in Paris. And there is a huge investigation going into your missing wife who's pregnant with your child, and you're worried about maintaining an affair that's only been going on for a few weeks? Like, what? Like, it's really hard not to hate this man. But there's some information that really is going to make you think he possibly didn't get a fair trial. And we're going to get to that very shortly. On January 24th, 2003, Laci's family publicly told the media that they no longer supported Scott. They were no longer on his side, and any support that they had for him was gone. Scott also told police that Laci knew about his affair. Yeah, he said, Laci, she knew all about Amber. And honestly, she didn't really mind. I mean, she's 7 months pregnant with our baby. And, you know, I can casually go and sleep with other women, tell them I'm a widower. And she was just really chill about it. Like, who the hell is going to believe that? But yeah, he's trying to say that somehow Laci was just cool with the affair. Searching continued and everyone was getting frustrated. Nobody knew what was, what had happened to Laci. Like, time was passing. It wasn't until April 13th when a couple was walking along the beach and they discovered a deceased baby. It was baby Connor. He had been found along the San Francisco Bay shoreline. His body still had the umbilical cord attached to him, but the end of the umbilical cord looked as though it had been torn. It didn't look like someone had, given birth to him and then, you cut the umbilical cord. It looked like the umbilical cord had been teared, which is very alarming. The following day, on April 14th, a woman's body was discovered. Now, they couldn't confirm at the time that it was Laci because the body didn't have a head. Limbs were missing. They did know that the woman, the body they'd found, had recently been pregnant. So it was pretty safe to say that this was Laci, but initially they could not confirm it was Laci. Promptly, the police sent both bodies for DNA testing. On April 18th, 2003, it was confirmed that they were the bodies of Laci Peterson and her son, Connor. There was a lot of debate of whether Laci had actually birthed Connor before she had died, because I guess the state that Connor's body was in, some people believed he had been in her uterus, so she would have been killed while she was pregnant with him still inside her. She went into the water, and then at some point he was expelled from her body, and I'm assuming some type of fish or some type of water life, some kind of animal maybe had tore the umbilical cord. But there were other people who thought that it didn't look like a fetus. It looked like a baby. So just remember that for a little bit later when I start to get into why I do think he deserves a new trial. Again, I do think he's guilty. I just don't think he got a fair trial. I think there was a lot of evidence that was not included. And then there's there's a juror. We're going to get into her because she's a whole hot mess on her own. But back to the story. The FBI and the police did a lot of searching and testing of the home and the boat and everything involved. They had found a hair on a pair of pliers that were in the boat, and they matched the hair to Laci's hair. There was also concrete that Scott had purchased, and Scott claimed that he was using that to make an anchor. They believe that the concrete was used to weigh down Laci's body in San Francisco Bay. Scott Peterson's trial began June 1st, 2004. And basically, they believed that he decided he didn't want Laci, he didn't want to have baby Connor, and he wanted her out of the way, and he had killed her and disposed of her body. On November 12th, 2004, he was found guilty of first-degree murder of Laci and second-degree murder of baby Connor. Scott was sentenced to death, and then he did a couple of appeals, and then they dropped the death penalty, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for Laci, and for 15 years for second degree for the murder of Connor. So all was said and done, and it seemed like they had the right guy. And I still do think they have the right guy. But let me tell you all the reasons why the Los Angeles Innocence Project has taken on Scott's case, because they don't believe that he received a fair trial. One of the reasons, and this is kind of a big reason for me of why I think Scott deserves a new trial. So in a circumstantial case, usually it's a lot, and it was a very strong circumstantial case against Scott. Usually a circumstantial case is evidence is built on top of each other. So you hear this and you learn more, and then it kind of like the case builds up till you get to the point where you are beyond a reasonable doubt that Scott was guilty. This is what made me decide that I thought he was guilty. So remember how I told you that he had gone fishing on the day that Laci went missing? There were presented at trial, it was told to the jury and obviously the judge, the whole courtroom, that a dog had picked up Laci's scent at the dock where Scott's boat was. So when I heard that, I thought, I'm done. That was the piece of evidence for me that really confirmed it. Like, there's all these other things that make me believe that he's guilty, but that one piece was very significant to me. Turns out the dog doesn't know what the hell the dog's doing. The dog that picked up Laci's scent at the dock where Scott's boat was, he's wrong 66% of the time. So it's more likely that he was wrong. And I don't want to shade the dog, maybe he's getting older, maybe it's a tough job for him. I don't want to shade the dog. But if the dog is wrong more than they're right, how on earth could you possibly trust that? And then they had a dog who was a lot more reliable go in, and that dog could not find Laci's scent. But that's my big reason behind thinking he deserves a new trial. But there's a whole lot of other information. So we're going to start with Strawberry Shortcake. Juror number 7. Yes, her name is not Strawberry Shortcake. During the trial, that's what she was called because she had really bright red hair during the trial. Well, turns out she lied when she was filling out the jury information. So basically, if you're going to be on a jury, they give you a questionnaire. And one of the questions they ask you is if you have ever been a victim of a violent crime. She said no. Now, that's not true. Well, she was pregnant. So this is like way before the trial. Strawberry Shortcake, she's pregnant. The father of the baby is extremely abusive to her. Then he's dating another woman who is coming after her, and she feared for her life and her unborn baby's life. She got a restraining order, and on the restraining order, the reason she wanted the restraining order is she was pregnant and she was worried about herself and her baby's safety. Sound familiar? And if that information would have been disclosed, she never would have been on the jury. Like, that would have had her, no one would have wanted her on the jury, because having that experience, especially so similar to Laci, she never would have been on the jury. But it's believed that she really wanted to be on the jury. Now, there's a number of different reasons why people believe she wanted to be on the jury. One is that people think this crime reminded her of what had happened to her, and she wanted justice. And in her mind, justice was convicting Scott Peterson. That's why she wanted on the trial. Now, there's other people who think she did it for financial reasons. And this is something very strange about the American justice system. Juries, once the trial is over, they can make a shit ton of money on cases. So in this case, at the time, this was the biggest case ever. Like, this was the biggest case that was going on. If there was going to be a case that if you wanted to be involved in and then you could tell your story later and make money, this was the case to be on. This was the case you wanted to be a jury member on. She did make a lot of money off of this. She co-wrote a book. She was in documentaries. She was on 2020. Like, she was interviewed over and over and over and over, and she was paid a lot of money for a lot of these interviews and this co-authoring of this book. And to me, it doesn't make sense. A jury should not be able to make money off being a jury member. I'm Canadian, and in Canada, a jury, once the trial's over, they can't just go on the news or go to anyone who will pay them and tell them whatever they want to. They still have to keep that information private. And I mean, if they have sort of traumatic, experience going through a trial, they can get help from healthcare providers, but they're not allowed to write a book and go make money off the trial just because they were a jury member. Then Strawberry Shortcake, she's not done. She starts writing letters to Scott Peterson, and Scott Peterson writes back to her. They wrote each other back and forth like almost 20 times between the two of them. I don't know what on earth that seems normal in. Could you imagine being on a jury convicting this man and then you start writing letters to him? And not like one letter. I think one letter would be weird, but she was sending him letters over and over and over, and she's like wanting to understand him, and she's talking about the experiences she's gone through that are similar to him, and like the whole thing is just really, really bizarre. This woman should never have been on this jury, and she was. And with all of this information, and there's more, I'm going to tell you more reasons why he, in my opinion, and some people's opinion. I know I'm probably going to get attacked for saying that I think he deserves a new trial. Again, I just want to preface it by saying I do think he's guilty. I just don't think he got a fair trial. Another thing that's a little questionable about this is the age of baby Connor. If he would have died on the 23rd or the 24th, a lot of people in the case believe that Laci was actually killed on the 23rd, the night before. And the whole story about what happened on the 24th was just, Scott's imagination or whatever. But he would have been 31 weeks. The body, when it was discovered, was 35 weeks. And again, there were medical professionals that did not believe it was a fetus. They believe that the baby had been born before it went into the water. Now, for me, the one thing I think about is possibly if Scott had killed Laci, maybe when he killed Laci, maybe Connor came out. I don't know. There's the information about the age of the baby and whether or not he was born or was still in her uterus when he went in the water. Nobody agrees on any of that. So I'm not going to really put much stock in it because nobody agrees. Everybody has different opinions on all of that. But that is one thing that comes up, because what is suspected of what actually happened to Laci if Scott did not do this was that she witnessed a robbery. Another big reason why I do think he deserves another trial is that there were a lot of independent witnesses who saw Laci alive walking their dog when Scott had already left. Now, there were neighbors who had seen her, but there were also independent witnesses. So it wasn't like a group of people that all knew each other, saw Laci, and then maybe they all talked about it and said, oh yeah, I saw her. Oh, I saw her. I saw her. When police were interviewing, these were independent witnesses that a lot of, like, they didn't know each other. So there's a lot more stock in what someone says if it can be confirmed by at least 4 other people and they don't know each other. So how on earth would these people all come up with the same story and they all claim that Laci was wearing the clothing that Scott said she was wearing that morning, but then she wasn't found in those clothes? So how did Laci change clothes? So I'm sure that if you've heard about this case before, you know that there was a burglary very close to the Peterson home that happened between the 24th and the 26th. So a neighbor was away. The house across the street from the Peterson house was robbed between the 24th and the 26th. So during the trial, they claim the robbery happened on the 26th. But that doesn't appear to be true for a number of reasons. What is believed by the people saying Scott deserves a new trial is that Laci was walking the dog, witnessed a burglary in process, and the dog and the leash would have run off, and they believe that they took Laci. Now, the weird thing is that on the 25th, so before the police are saying when the burglary happened, there was this old orange van. And the most important part about this old orange van that was found very, very close to the Peterson home is there was a bloody mattress in the back of the van, and somebody had attempted to burn the van to destroy the evidence. They tested to confirm that all this blood in this mattress was human blood. What they didn't do, they didn't check if it was Laci's. So what the alternative theory is that Laci was dumped where she was because they were burglaring a home. Laci catches them in the middle of like burglaring a home. They kill Laci. Some people suggest that she was kept alive for a period of time. I don't know if I really believe that. I don't know. Again, I think Scott's guilty, but let's just go with that theory that she's walking the dog, she sees the van, they're robbing her neighbor's house, and they take Laci and kill her so that she can't tell anyone. They believe that the person or people who really killed Laci, again, this is their theory, ended up putting Laci in the water near where Scott's boat was. The reason they did this is it was all over the news that they were searching this boating area and that the scent of Laci had been picked up there. So if they've already got Scott as the suspect and they're claiming he went to this boat dock, if we're going to get rid of the body, let's get rid of the body where they think the guy who did it is. Now, I'm giving you all of this information. I don't believe it's true. I 100% believe that Scott Peterson murdered Laci and Connor. And I believe he did it on the 23rd. And then he spent the 24th trying to cover it up. The reason I do believe he deserves a new trial is because I do believe his constitutional rights were violated. I do believe that definitely Strawberry Shortcake should not have been a juror. And I do think there was a lot of evidence that should have been presented at trial that was not. Now, I'm nervous to post this video because I know most people are probably going to disagree with me, and that's okay. That's what true crime is all about, giving our opinions, thinking things through, talking things through. So my final analysis is, yep, he's guilty, but he didn't get a fair trial. And I'm a big, big believer in everybody deserves a fair trial. I don't think Scott got one. So if you're still here and you don't hate me for my opinion, please subscribe, share this video if you know anyone who's into true crime, because I'm not seeing a lot of videos about this, and I feel like there should be a lot of videos about it. And I think the reason there isn't a lot of videos about it is because I don't think anybody wants to say that they think Scott Peterson deserves a new trial. Trust me, I didn't want to say it either, but that's what I believe. But again, I do believe he committed the crime. So that is the end of today's video. I would love to know your opinion in the comments. Please don't hold back. If you think I'm nuts for having this opinion, please tell me. I want to hear it all. If you think I'm just absolutely insane, feel free to tell me that, because I'm not interested in people always agreeing with me. I think, debates are more interesting when people disagree, when people are looking at different angles. So in the comment section, tell me what you really think. Do you think Scott did it? Do you think he deserves a new trial? Do you think Scott Peterson doesn't matter enough to even get a new trial? Because I think that's what a lot of people's opinion is going to be. But mine just happens to be a bit different. Please don't hurt me. I'm just kidding. Thank you so much for being. If you are still here, I really appreciate you. Please engage with the video, like, share, comment, everything. I'm trying to grow the channel. I'm trying to get to 2,000 subscribers, and I need your help to do it. Please let me know what you thought of the video, and yeah, don't go easy on me. Give me your real opinions. That's what I'm interested in. And I will see you in the next one.